Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we are going to talk about functions. So in this lesson, we're going to talk about functions. So a function is like a mini program within your main program. So it is a reusable block of code that performs a specific task. Instead of writing the same code repeatedly, we can put that code in a function and just call it whenever we need it. So we write it once, we write the function once, and we can use it multiple times. So it saves the time and effort. So if you have a program that calculates, for example, the sum of two numbers in multiple places of your code, using a function avoids writing the same code again and again. So the program will become easier to understand and to maintain, of course. And functions break down, the complexity tasks, the complex tasks into smaller, manageable pieces. So, for example, here, if you remember previously, we were talking about like printing one thing here, like saying uh, the sum is, and then the number and L. So let me just initialize two numbers saying that int a equals 10 and int b equals 12, for example. And we are saying that the sum is a plus b, okay? So using these three lines, we can have the sum of a and b. However, just imagine that we have like 1000 lines and this code continues like for many times, and we have different blocks of codes here. Just imagine here we have a lot of codes and different tasks to be performed, and at some point again we would like to add two other numbers, like we would like to write down int c equals, for example, 15, and int d equals 20, for example. And then we see out the sum of c and d is c plus d and l. So you see, we are repeating this calculation again, and we had it one time here, and then we are repeating it here, and we may need to repeat it several times. So instead of writing these many codes repeatedly, we can simply just define a function to do the job for us. In order to define a function, we need to first declare it a priori to our main function. So this is our main function. So any C++ program will have a main function. Everything is within that main function. So before this main function, we can declare our additional functions that we would like to have. For example, here we declare a function called add, and it has two values as input values, int a and int b. So within the parentheses, it shows how many input it can take and what are the types of the input that it can take. So the first type is int a, so the first type is int and the second type is int. So the input of the function called add are two integers, and here this int shows the output of this function. So basically, we learned 3 points here. So this is the name of the function, and within the parentheses, we learn how many inputs the function has and what are the types of the inputs. In this case, they are both integers. It could be one integer, one float, it could be anything. And the third point that we learned here is that the output of this function, the resulting of this function would be also an integer. So we declare the function right here. So we are just saying the name, the output, and the inputs, and a semicolon, okay? Then when we come here in the main function, we call the function like this. So if we call the function, now the in the within this int main function we can call add. Why? Because initially a priori to this main function we have defined the function. Okay, so we must define it before the int main. So when we call it within the int main, so it recognizes it and it does not return an error. However, this function is just declared here. In order to know what this function do, I close the int main function. We go through the details of the function here. So basically, it would be something like this. We declare the function, we use the function. However, after the int main function is finished, we write down the details of the functionality of that function. So in order to do that, to see what this function is doing, we come to the end of the code. We exactly write what we wrote already for its declaration. Instead, we don't have a semicolon in the end, and we have two brackets within which we define the function. So every function has inputs and outputs. Here in our case, we have two inputs that are integers. And the output would be the value of a plus b. So this could be a plus b, or it could be like c plus d, whatever the input of the function is, it can add it. So basically we are saying if the input is a and b, so you return those gathered inputs. So this will return the value of this function. So we write down return and we do the addition here. So this is how this function would work, and we go up to the main function. So I summarize it one more time before I go into more details. We declare the function before the int main function. We define the function after the int main function and say what it is going to do. And it must have one return value. So it usually has either a return value or it's a void function. So void function, we will talk about it in a few seconds or in a few minutes. But in this case, because it's not a void, if it was void here instead of int, we had void. So it's not a void function. It's a normal function that returns an integer value. To return this integer value, we write down return and we do whatever we want to do here. So and then we want to use this function in the main function, in the main block of code. So we define one int result and its value is this. So this is how we call the function. If you remember, the function name was add. So it's going to call the function named add with two values, 5 and 3. And when it is going to call this function with 5 and 3, it's like saying that, okay, one input is 5, the other input is 3. So it's going to add 5 to 3 and it is returning its result, which is 8. So 8 is returned and assigned to the result. And now we are printing the value of result. Let me just compile it once. Okay, so now we see that the sum is 8. As we discussed, here we call the function with two inputs. So if we are saying the inputs are integer, they must be integer here as well. It's not like that we can declare them as integer and we can put like 5.2 and 3. It returns error. So they must be integer. So then 5 and 2 are called using add function, and 5 plus 2 plus 3, sorry, it will be 8, and 8 will be returned here as the number assigned to the result. So instead of, for example, adding the different integers and different parameters throughout the code again and again and again, so we don't need to write it anymore. We just, whenever we want to use it, we just call the function. So let me just do another thing. I would say int result 2 equals add, like we can say 10 and 2, for example. It's not possible to write 10 and 2.2. There will be a problem if we run the program. So, and then I see out the second sum is, and I print the value result 2 and del. So let me just compile this. Yeah. So here we see we didn't have to do the calculation anymore. We just call the function once more with new values. So you can call the function millions of times, and with new values you can do the calculation. However, the function is written only one time. So it is more efficient to have functions that do the job for you, so you don't have to call them one by one. So this is very important to keep in mind to use the functions. And another thing that we could do here is like the following. So as you see here, we are printing the sum is in the main block. In order to be super efficient, we can also mention that in this function we define a new integer called c that is equal to a plus b, and then we see out the sum is, and we print c every time. So here what we can do is like this. So let me just clear this part, and this and this. Let me see if I have errors or not. Okay, great. So you see, even now the code is even more clear. So here we are only saying add 5 and 3, add 10 and 2. So this is going to add any two numbers that are called using the add name, because the name of our function is like this. And this function now, it is actually not returning anything. So we can change the function to void. So what is void? Void, we change the function output, we put it void, and we forget about this. Let me just first run to see. Okay, great. So here, previously, we were doing the calculation directly. We were saying return a plus b. However, then we decided, and then the return value was being assigned to the result here. However, then we decided to not to assign these function values to any integer, and we do all the calculation in the function. So the code, the main block will be more clear. Therefore, we do the calculation here and we print everything here. So we are not printing anything here. So a void function is a function that is going to return no value. It's only doing some calculation. So now I change the integer output to a void value, to a void function, because it's not returning any value. It is simply just doing some calculation and printing something. If it is going to return something, it has to have some output data type like integer, float, double, etc. However, if it's not specifically returning something like this, like a plus b, for example, if it does not have something like this, it's a void function that is doing some calculation for us. So this was a brief introduction of the functions. In next lectures, we are going to do some coding exercises. Thanks for watching.